Do you feel like your story isn't good enough to share? I used to think this myself, that because nothing big ever happened to me, that I didn't have anything to tell or anything to share. But how wrong I was. In this episode of the Powerful Content Podcast, I'm joined by communication and business strategist Lizzie McCauley to explore why every story, big or small, matters in building trust and connection with your audience. Lizzie shares her expert tips on how to weave your personal experiences into your content so that it not only humanizes your brand, but also strategically aligns with your business goals. Whether you're drafting your bio, creating email content, or connecting on social media, Lizzie's insights will help you shape your story in a way that captures attention and fosters genuine relationships. Welcome to the Powerful Content Podcast, your go-to source for content creation, strategy, and business inspiration. I'm your host, Mel Daniels, content strategist, coach, and speaker, empowering women across the globe to grow their business with powerful content that connects, nurtures, and converts. So, if you're ready to create standout content that gets you noticed and remembered, or build an aligned audience who love you and are ready to buy from you, you're in the right place. I believe that content has the power to connect us all. It's up to you how you use it. Listen in for genuine and insightful chats with guests, as well as practical tools and strategies from me. It's so lovely to have you here. Let's dive into the show. I acknowledge the Wongal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the country that I am recording from today. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nation people listening today. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to episode 145 of the Powerful Content Podcast. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this episode because I know that you'll be glad that you did. Today, I have with me my friend and communication and business strategist, Lizzie McCauley, a woman who tells it like it is and isn't afraid of being real. Welcome to the podcast, Lizzie. Hey, Mel, it's been a long time coming, my friend. I'm super excited to join in today. It has been a long time coming, but I know that this episode is going to be full of so much gold for my listeners. Yeah. Now, we met a couple of years ago through a mastermind, and something I absolutely love about you is that you do tell it like it is and you wear your heart on your sleeve. And I think that this is really important to know, like in a world of masks and, kind of like stretching the truth and social media present, it's actually so refreshing to see someone who isn't afraid of showing up exactly how they are. And I want to know, have you always been this way? I possibly. But a couple of years back, I went to my best friend from high school's wedding, and it turns out her mum, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, Lizzie, you haven't changed at all." I thought, is that a compliment? I'm not sure that's a compliment. So I just find it takes less energy to stay exactly in your own lane of who you are and what you stand for, and you don't have to remember much if you just be yourself. Right? No, that's right. You don't have to remember all the lies that you've made up. This is it. I would, because I would not remember a single one of them, and I would trip myself up immediately. Oh, and my face never lies, even if I would like it to. So I might as well just stay in my lane, right? I love it. Now today we're talking about stories, and I absolutely love this topic because in my book, The Power of Content, I talk about how for a very, very long time, I did not believe that I had a story to tell. There was no big moment in my life. There was nothing that I had to overcome. There was no big challenges. So I just really didn't believe that I had any story or had a story that was worth telling, let alone, my own kind of story. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective on stories and crafting stories and when to use them, etc. So let's start by understanding, why do we even need to have a story or tell our story? Oh, absolutely. So it's the most common thing in the world. You think, I don't have any capital T trauma, therefore I don't have a story. I've spent 5 years in this marketing space now, specifically 10 years as a professional writer, but 5 years working for myself in a small business. And time after time after time, that is the most common response that I have, especially from women, but kind of across the board is, well, my story is not important. I did nothing really big has happened in my life. And for starters, that's just not true. Everybody has had experiences that shape them. And that experience leads to exactly who they are and where they are today. So story matters, right? Even if it isn't like, then I married the prince, the end. Like, that's not the story we're talking about. But when we get into marketing, we're talking about the deep human connection, right? If we don't have that, we're going to really struggle to build that trust and rapport and be able to sell to anybody, really. Because the story we're telling isn't really about us, Mel, even though it's about us. Really, our story is about our audience in a way, because generally speaking, our audience is probably going to gravitate towards us based on our specific nuances, our ideas, our experience, our ways of thinking, our ways of articulating our ways of thinking. We build community around our words and around our story. Now, I've developed an entire podcast around people's stories and how different and unique everybody is, right? No two people are the same. No two stories are the same, and it really adds to the wealth of richness of human nature simply by articulating our own path, I guess. So you mentioned something really interesting there, and I don't think that this is something that a lot of people think about, and that is thinking about your ideal client whilst you're crafting or whilst you're telling your story. So why is it so important that we don't just tell the story, just tell it how it is, and not think about our ideal client? So what's the catch there? Well, in the gentlest possible terms, we're all fairly basic narcissists. So, as customers, as consumers, we want to hear about ourselves in the end. Oh, I relate to that. Oh, that relates to me. But the problem is we're also really flippin' lazy as well. So we don't want, as readers, to join the dots for ourselves. So as the business owner and the marketing efforts that you pull together need to join the dots for your ideal customer, so that they go, oh yeah, that is me, because you've told them that it's for them, or they've joined the dots on why this is important to read. Because if you're just going, once upon a time I was born and then this happened and then that happened to me and then that happened to me, like, hello, that would put everybody to sleep faster than you care to admit. But if you say, like, one of the most common things I see, Mel, is things like, I have 20 years of experience. Cool. That doesn't mean anything to me as a customer. But if you're telling me you have 20 years of experience, which means X, Y, Z for you, dear reader. So it means that you're going to get faster outcome. You're going to get a better price. You're going to get a higher standard of quality. Suddenly I'm like, oh, I see. And so weaving in, even though it's storytelling, we need to come at it from a strategic brain, from a marketing brain. And it's actually it's not as easy as it sounds. Yeah. So even though, I've been doing it for a long time now, so it kind of is just natural to me, but I've been teaching for such a long time, and is one of the hardest things to learn. Like, an easy way into it, though, is playing the so what game. Have you ever played the so what game, Mel? I have played the so what game. I love playing the so what game with my clients and members as well. Let's explain how it goes. Okay, so what essentially is drilling down into why whatever you're sharing is important. And if you don't have a good answer to the so what, then you probably shouldn't include it, to be honest. So I have experience. Okay, cool. So what? Why is that good? Well, if I have experience, that probably means that I will get the job done better, faster, more economically, even though you might charge more. It's going to add more gravitas. It's going to add a certain layer of expensive to your business, et cetera, et cetera. So what? So your customers will be willing to pay you more. Or so you'll save money and time and you'll get to market faster. So what? See, and we've really drilled into what's in it for the reader.
Yeah.
More time. I want more money, and I definitely want to spend less money on the professional services, or I want to retain staff, or I want to do this or that. Like if you can paint the picture of what's in it for them, the story is effortless, and the sale is effortless because you've really taken the time to develop why. If you're just talking about yourself, nobody's going to engage in the same way as if you join the dots for your customer. Mm. So it sounds like not joining the dots for our ideal client is a common mistake that people make when crafting their story. Are there any other mistakes that you commonly see people make when they're trying to craft or tell their story? Oh, that's probably the biggest one is sort of assuming people know why what you're offering is good. When you should never assume anything. We need to, well, aside from assume that your customer knows nothing about what you're offering, sometimes, and this is why I'm moving in the direction I've been moving lately, is because we get really attached to things and we're in it and we can't see the wood for the trees because we're in it and we're doing it every day and we're churning out and we're going, yeah, this is great. Do we ever stop and check if this is great, if anyone else thinks this is great, or if this is landing the way it does in your head? What I see a lot, Mel, is because we are experts in our business, we are experts in whatever our chosen area as well, is that we just assume that everybody is on the same level as us, but we're not. And so either one of two things will happen. One, we'll use things like jargon or we'll use industry terms, which you know inside out and is just blatantly obvious, but to someone else is mysterious. And so there's a barrier there. We create barriers that way. Or like, and I would be lying if I said I hadn't been guilty of this over the years. Something else that can happen is that we bombard with information because we want to provide lots of value and as much as possible, as often as possible. And we want to be clear that we are experts in all of these things. We want to justify our presence and stamp our authority and all these things. But in the meantime, we've given them absolutely everything we know. And the message doesn't get received because it's almost burying the lead in that way, like, let me tell you everything. And then your reader goes, oh my God, I just wanted to know what the time was. That's overwhelm, isn't it? And we all know that overwhelm causes inaction and indecision. So exactly. The less that we can tell them, the better sometimes. So when we're thinking about crafting our stories, we should make sure that we think about our ideal client. Don't assume that our ideal client knows everything and stop talking so much and overwhelming. When we're thinking about actually putting our story together then, Lizzie, where do we start? Where do we start trying to articulate that? That's a really good question. And I'm probably going to give you a really unsatisfying response. It's kind of wherever feels the most comfortable and relevant for you and for your offer. Because we are talking about story in terms of marketing, not just in terms of writing our biography, right? Where this is specifically sales related or conversion copy related, let's say. So it needs to be relevant. So like, I don't need to know that you had a pet dog unless you're selling dog food or you're trying to attract an audience of dog lovers, for instance. If it's not relevant to the offer, you should probably skip it. So something, for instance, like bios are a really interesting specialty that I see comes through a lot. And it's like there tends to be like, so-and-so did this and this and this and this and this and this and this. In her spare time, Mel loves to walk along the beach and eat hamburgers on Tuesdays. And it's like, well, that's fine. And I understand why people are including that is to humanize themselves. But if it's not relevant to the offer, then it's just superfluous information that'll either get ignored or will slow down the desire to purchase. So I don't know, is that harsh? But like harsh but true? And harsh but fair. That's what we say in our house. Harsh but fair. Like, and let me be clear, I'm not saying that as a human to human, I'm not interested in that, but as a consumer to as a business owner, that's not what's going to move the needle for me buying from you or not. like unless it's relevant. So I think really staying relevant and also only sharing what you're comfortable to share. Because, there's no rules that say you have to share every detail about yourself. If you got a part of you that you want to keep for yourself, that is totally allowed. I think, we're in this weird world where everyone feels a lot of pressure to share a lot of themselves or a lot of their kids or a lot of, stuff that maybe they'd rather hold on to. That's allowed. You're allowed to keep parts of yourself for you and your family and your closest people. You don't have to share everything all the time forever. Yeah, and I love that point, Lizzie, because I feel like a lot of people do feel that pressure that they do have to share everything about themselves. I've really encouraged my clients, and I know that you probably do as well, to kind of set those boundaries. What is that boundary where you are not prepared to cross over? So, you spoke about kids. I know someone who has 4 amazing girls and never, ever, ever talks about them, ever. And it's just really, really interesting. But at the other end of the spectrum, there's plenty of people out there who share that they do have children and share photos of them and what have you. So it's really understanding what that personal boundary is for you and whether you're prepared to cross it or not. Yeah. I really love those 3 things that you just said. When we're trying to think about starting mapping our story or telling our story, it needs to be relevant, it needs to make most sense to the purpose, I guess. Like, what are we actually using it for? And then only being comfortable knowing what we want to share. So when we think about our story, are there some essential elements that we should always include? So you kind of said just then that, if I include that I go to the gym and bake, which I do include in my bio, it humanizes it, yes, but it's not necessarily relevant. What are the parts that are more relevant of a story and that we should be including in our stories? Okay. Well, let's use the bio as an example. So I have a really clear structure when I'm stepping out a bio and I teach it out. Actually, I have a bonus resource that I could share with your listeners that would be helpful. Let's do that. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes. Great. Yes. So essentially, a bio is one of the easiest, most common ways that we need to share our story. Obviously, it feeds through everything that we do. We introduce ourselves online in lots of different capacities. Some of us are speaking, have speaking engagements. Some of us are, populating websites or social media feeds or whatever. And a lot of it can be condensed down into our bio, which likely will reside in several places at once and need to be tailored slightly depending on the context. So the structure, we start with introducing who you are, what do you do, who do you do it for? And the key element that people neglect in this, they're probably pretty good at that. The hardest thing is why. Why do you do it? Right? Oh, I'm a banker. Why are you a banker? 'Cause I needed a job? No. So when we're talking about the why, we're talking about why is it important in order to position yourself as aligned with your audience. For instance, I've spent a lot of time working with people in the coaching industry, for instance. So there's lots of different health and wellness types, business types, spiritual types, all sorts of things. And what we're really setting ourselves up for is to position ourselves as advocates for the people we're trying to work with. So usually a why in this context is something to do with either, maybe what you're for or against is a really great. I'm not okay with people having businesses that fail, even though they've put in a million hours of effort. That's a why. It's maybe not perfect yet because I just pulled it out the top of my head. But just for example, if we can make it clear that the reason we're here is to serve, then it becomes much easier to ask someone to read the next paragraph, because the next paragraph is going to tell you a bit more about me, the business owner. And they're not going to read that if they don't think you care about them. So then the next part of the story becomes, here's my experience. Is your opportunity to build authority. So we're talking about, maybe I studied here or I worked there or I worked with these types of people and achieved these types of results. That's really helpful. We need to build as much evidence as we can, as much evidence as possible for people to understand why you were the best choice for the job. And again, we can't just say, I worked at back. Why is that important? What does that mean? Or I don't know, I worked on a farm as a kid. Okay, how does that connect to your offer?
What did that teach you? Through this experience, I built grit, determination, wisdom, whatever it happens to be, Um, and so that's quite a chunky paragraph. Probably could stretch out to 2 if you really wanted to. What are you doing with all of this now? Comes next. All of this experience I've been brought together to build the thing I'm most passionate about, my business XYZ. After that comes some kind of call to action. How can we stay in touch with each other? If you want to learn more about me, you want to connect, you want to work with me, go to whichever place. So for some people, they're going to have a Facebook group. For other people, they're going to have a website. You need to specify call to action like that to where it's being posted. So you're not going to ask people to join your Facebook group from your Facebook group, for instance. So it's not a set and forget thing, but it should be whatever aligns with you and what you want to do. So a lot of people that I work with, Mel, will have, well, am I supposed to do X, Y, Z? Aren't I supposed to have a booking system, or aren't I supposed to have a Facebook group, or aren't I supposed to, I don't know, have a sales call before somebody purchases from me? And ultimately, the answer to that every single time is it depends. It depends. What's your strategy? Why are we doing this? Why are we here? What are you hoping to achieve with this bio in this setting, for instance? And then after that, once you've answered all of those questions, then it's just some kind of signature sign off. It's really fun when people have a recognizable signature sign off as well. So that's something that I would highly recommend too. So that's one version of one story. Our whole business, our whole lives, everything we communicate is narrative, essentially, especially when it comes to selling. That's just one version of a structure that's really easy to follow. Takes a little bit of refinement, but it should set you up to be able to pull bits and pieces of that for other things as well.
Yeah, great. So the bio is about introducing you and who you do it for, but most importantly, remember the why. Then talking about yourself, your experience, and building that authority with some evidence, a call to action, and a signature sign off. I love that. I love that. Super simple, but just gives you a great framework to start writing a great bio. I'll make sure that I pop that resource that you have in the show notes. Now, besides our bio, where else can we use stories in our business, in our content?
Absolutely. Well, everywhere. I mean, like, it's an unsatisfying answer too. Absolutely everything is storytelling, right? So a sales page has a narrative, right? Who is the buyer before they use your product? So everybody knows about, or service, excuse me, product or service. So everybody knows about pain points, right? My personal preference is not to niggle at those pain points. There's enough pain in the world as it is, but you need to have an understanding of them to understand what you need to solve and how what you offer solves that problem, and how are they going to feel after you've solved their problem for them, whatever thing you're offering. So that's a narrative in itself. And it's maybe not it can be your signature story. I used to be here, then I did this. Now my life is like that, at the most basic level. But there's also the story of your customer. Maybe they're really struggling with something and they're just looking for that one thing that's going to solve it all. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about like I made 10K in 10 days and this is the one thing you need to do. That's not what I mean. But everybody has a problem that needs solved. Otherwise, nothing would be bought or sold anywhere ever, I need plastic bags. I'll go to the shop. I'll buy plastic bags. What brand do you buy? I need guidance on my strategy. I don't know who to trust, or I need a service provider for my social media, but I've used people before and I've been burnt, right? Problems. How are you the right person for the job? Well, that becomes a story, doesn't it? And not a bedtime story. Once upon a time, there was a struggling little business owner and they only just needed a nice social media agency to save them from stress. It's not like that, but everything's a story. I think an opportunity for a story anyway. I don't know.
No, I totally agree with you. And, if we're just talking stories in general, I feel like people think that every time they tell a story, it has to be about themselves and their whole, biography and their
what happened 10 years ago. But it's the little things in life, isn't it, that can draw out that meaning, and that your ideal client can either see them inside that story, see themselves inside that story, or they can imagine themselves inside that story, which I think is kind of fun. Now, one of the places that I love to use stories, and I know that you do too, Lizzie, is with emails. Emails are the best, man. I love talking about emails. I could go off on another one here, but let's just be cool. I'll be cool. I promise. I'll be fine. Emails are great. Well, for so many reasons. One is that 100% that the people on your list have asked to be there. So you've already got a far more qualified audience than kind of the hitting and hoping that we do with social media, is that sometimes people will see it, sometimes people won't. And the chances of people seeing it are not great in the first place. And even when they do see it, are they necessarily your ideal audience? Question marks. It's not a sure thing, right? But as soon as you get into email marketing, then the people have subscribed for a reason. And if they don't like you, they can unsubscribe. And that always sucks, even though it's part of the process. Nobody likes to see the unsubscribes coming in, but that's just a signal that they're not your ideal client. So it's fine. But there's so much data attached to your email system. How many people opened it? How many people clicked? Are people engaged? There's so much you can see just from the data that comes from your emails. And it's super cool because you know what to tweak if it's not working, if you're not getting a solid click-through rate. All right, well, then your calls to action need to be stronger. Maybe you're not getting a great open rate, then your subject line needs to be better, maybe. What can you do about it? There's lots. And we could do a whole other podcast episode on email marketing, I think, Lizzie. But what I'm hearing from you, though, is that you can use email marketing as one part of your whole entire ecosystem. And I know that you're all about the strategy and making sure that not only does, the choices that you make align with your time, energy, and resources, which I absolutely love, but they're strategic as well. And they serve a purpose and they're intentional. I know that you have an email resource as well, so I'll make sure that I pop that in the show notes as well if anyone needs it. But just to wrap this up about stories and where we can use them and why we use them, what if we feel like we're not good enough to share our story, or maybe we feel a little bit reluctant or scared to share our story? What tips could you give someone who's feeling like that? Well, it's totally normal to feel like that. I work every day with people who go, and they're reticent to share. Like we talked about before, maybe they think that their story doesn't matter. Maybe they feel like they're not important enough to share, or maybe they're just shy. It's normal. It's totally allowed. But let me tell you, there is somebody out there who needs to hear your story right now, right? There's somebody, it's going to make all the difference in the world to see that somebody gets them, or somebody has lived the thing that you're most fearful of and seen the other side of it, or somebody just needs to be inspired today. And while it's not inspiring to you, you don't get to choose what's inspiring to somebody else. So share it, man. I love that advice so much, because there is someone out there right now who's listening to us, Lizzie, who's waiting for our listeners' social media post, for their next blog, for their next email, because there is going to be that little tidbit in there. There is going to be something that they need to hear right now. Yeah. And I just thought I would share something with you whilst you're talking. I actually have a copy of my book, The Power of Content, here. And, just feeling like you're not worthy enough to share, I just really want to encourage people to share their story. So in the book, I say, while I may not be out there saving lives or campaigning for change, I do have the power of delivering meaning and lessons. Stories are the snippets of everyday life that are relatable or can show a lesson learned or an opinion or perspective. So it goes exactly to what you were saying, Lizzie, that there really is something in there, something that you need to share, that you need to give your ideal client today. 100%. Yeah. And the thing that we are all facing in one way or another these days, Mel, is this isolation, this feeling like we're alone and nobody understands us. And this is part of what we do, especially as online business owners, is to build community. That's the biggest thing I think we really do, is to share our story in order to build community. And that's how we're successful as business owners as well, is by building that trust and rapport, and that it's not just business owner to one customer, but between your customers as well, because you're sharing this like experience or like perspective on things. And that's what builds the community. And it's so important that we feel seen and heard and understood, and like we're not alone. So you're absolutely right. And there's wisdom in that you may not recognize in yourself, but as you say, somebody needs to hear it. So, go do it.
Yes. Go do it. That's the quote from this episode I want you to take away, everyone. Go do it. Go do it. It's well worth it. Now, Lizzie, thank you so much for sharing all of that information about storytelling. I love to ask all of my podcast guests this one question, and that is that I'm all about women just really owning and using their superpowers. So what would you say is your superpower?
I'm so glad you asked, because I only just discovered that it was my superpower, but my superpower is actually my strategic brain. Yeah. So it's my favorite thing to do. And while I've been essentially claiming the space as a copywriter for the last 5 years, probably the last 2 years, I've barely been engaging in copy discussions, because what we're really engaging in is strategic discussions. So I'm finally at the point of naming and claiming my beautiful strategic brain. And that's my superpower.
That's so exciting. Not only that it is your superpower, but you are actually claiming it now. And I'm so excited to see where this new direction will take you, Lizzie. It's just so exciting. Do you have any final parting words of wisdom?
Oh, my favorite thing to share is actually a quote from my big brother when I was learning to drive. So it goes, life is 10% skill and 90% attitude. That's just so simple, but it's so true as well, isn't it? Yep. Because usually the thing that's holding us back is not our skill. Skills you can learn, attitudes you got to build over time and practice. And it doesn't feel good a lot of the time, but that's what's going to get us where we want to go, is our attitude and our skill.
And I love your attitude, Lizzie. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today and sharing your wisdom with my listeners. I truly appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I always have a good time with you, Mel. It's so much fun.
Thanks so much for listening. That's it for another week. To get more powerful content in your life, make sure you're following along on socials. My handle is @meldbusiness. And just in case you're wondering, the groovy music for this podcast was created by Just Here on SoundCloud. I'd also be super grateful if you took a moment to rate and review this podcast so more amazing women like you can experience the power of content. And if you're like, hell Mel, stop talking, I'm ready to work with you now, here's how we can work some powerful content magic together. Firstly, come and join the Content Effect, my membership inspiring women with service-based businesses to ditch the content chaos and start creating stand-out content that gets you noticed and makes sales. You can join us by using the link in the show notes or just Google the Content Effect. The second way we can work together is via my one-on-one packages. We can create a sustainable content strategy or start to build out your client journey. It's up to you. Hop on over to meldbusinessservices.com.au/services to find out more. Until next time, have a beautiful week and embrace the power of your content.